Today, I am honored to introduce someone who brings both deep wisdom and practical experience to the world of fungi. Kathryn Kay is the founder of MycoEarth, a groundbreaking company that bridges gourmet mushrooms cultivation with regenerative agriculture. With a background in nutrition, horticulture, and sustainable farming, Kathryn makes complex biological systems easy to understand and even easier to apply in our daily lives. What she's about to share about mushrooms, their cycles, their nutritional power, and how to cook them will shift the way you see food, health, and the soil beneath your feet. I am so happy for you to learn from her. Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm excited to be here with you. Very excited. Thank you for allowing me to share with your audience today about the fungal pharmacy. This is a fun presentation. We're going to talk about how to cook mushrooms, what happens in our body when we eat them, and how to use them in medicine as well. At first, we're going to define the kingdom of fungi, because within that entire kingdom is the lowly mushroom that we're going to be talking about today. Otherwise, the kingdom of fungi is one of the living kingdoms on the planet. They produce spores instead of seeds. And it also includes molds like you see on this strawberry. And it includes yeast like you see in the bread. But it also, again, is a mold when the bread goes bad, right? When it begins to decompose. And then the last picture is of a wonderful meal that I had years ago with mushrooms. So in general, the kingdom of fungi is any group of spore-producing organisms. So they don't have seeds, they have spores instead. And here at MycoEarth, we work with the spores with a microscope because primarily they are microscopic. Mushrooms and fungi feed on organic matter. So when they're in the forest, for example, they will help break down trees and leaves and any other once living organic matter to be able to put the nutrients back into the soil. So I think that's a very important thing that fungi does.
Yes, I have a question for you, Kathryn.
Yes.
So the mold you see on the bread, is that the mold from the air?
Yes, it's coming from the air. It's coming from the air. And what's interesting about that particular mold is that it's called penicillium, which is the same molecule that then was taken into a laboratory to make the antibiotic penicillin. Many of the pharmaceuticals that we have in this country they're based on fungi and the molecule thereof. And it's interesting that even when fungi is what you and I would call being bad, and it's kind of a rogue fungi, one that we wouldn't eat and we wouldn't cook with and so forth, we have found that it actually works to be able to work against cancer, for example. It will attack that cell. So even sometimes when we have a rogue fungi, it can be medicinally beneficial. But in this case, this is an airborne fungi in everybody's kitchen, it's just in the air. It's called penicillium, and its purpose is to decompose. So here it's decomposing, but again, the penicillium was used to make penicillin, which helps decompose a bacterial infection as an antibiotic. So I think that's very, it's interesting, isn't it? How it's all tied together.
Very much interesting.
Very tied together. Okay, my friend, here we go. So there's lots of different colors and shapes and so forth of mushrooms. Not all mushrooms are edible. And as I say sometimes in the presentations I give, some are so poisonous that you eat only once, if you get my point there. There are some mushrooms, like the lion's mane mushroom that is on the top row, clear to the right. That is a delicious mushroom that is also considered a medicinal mushroom. It is very good for the nerve systems within the body. It works against neuropathy, and it also has been proven to arrest early stage Alzheimer's. So it is wonderful to eat. A mushroom, a lion's mane steak burger is amazing. Amazing. So there are some mushrooms that we can't cultivate, like the morel mushroom, which is the lowest. It's on the bottom shelf to the left there. Only a few farms in the world are able to cultivate that at this point. And it is a delicious mushroom as well. It goes for a lot of money per pound. The mushroom that's right next to that is growing out of a grasshopper, is called a cordyceps. And cordyceps is, it's the gold of athletes, is the way that I put it in my mind. Every gold Olympic medalist in the last, I don't know how many Olympics, way back, have had a steady diet and taken medicinally this cordyceps mushroom. It helps open up the bronchi in the lungs. And so it allows more power with the body because there's oxygen in the body. And it also gives an energy boost that has nothing to do with the oxygen. So it's like having coffee with no downside, no drop. And it's all natural. It's a wonderful, wonderful mushroom. The mushroom that's in the upper left-hand corner is a chef favorite. It's a king oyster mushroom. There's a lot of B vitamins in that mushroom, and it helps the body to convert calories into energy, and to convert food in general into energy. Now, a chef will take that mushroom and cut it in the short direction, as you see there, because with enough garlic and enough scallopy flavors with that, you couldn't tell the difference between a seafood scallop and a mushroom scallop. It's a wonderful, wonderful mushroom. Okay, let's talk about how they grow in nature. And then we'll get into the wonderfulness of what happens within the body. So as you can see, we've got the sunflower to the left-hand side and then the mushroom life cycle to the right. The reason why I compare these is because it's very different than a plant. In the case of the sunflower, everything under the soil is just that root structure, right? We just know where the soil line is there. But with a mushroom, if you look at the numbers, 1, and it goes around clockwise, 1 through 6 are all underground. And we only just see the mushroom coming up out of the ground or the tree or on the farm within the substrate that we cook them in. So in mushroom farming, everything's underground. And then we just have the mushroom, which would be equivalent to only the sunflower poking its head up out of the soil. So what would be equal to the stem and the leaves and so forth is all underground for a mushroom.
That's fascinating.
I would love to show you how a mushroom sporulates, because when you go around that life cycle, I'd like to go back to that. So from the life cycle there, the number 1, the spores, which are the seeds, would come right out of that cap, and it would go into the wind or onto the ground or in the water to be carried away. So then the mushroom can branch out and grow in other places as well. So number 2 is actually, it's a spore print, and you don't get a spore print in nature. What I'm trying to simulate that is if I would have cut the cap off of the mushroom and then stuck it on a piece of glass and then maybe a coffee cup or something over the top of it, and then waited 12 or 24 hours, I could take the lid off the coffee cup and then hold it up to the light. This is exactly what I would see. So it looks exactly like the gills up in that cap of the mushroom I just took off, but all of those are spores that have dropped. Now, some spores are not microscopic. You can actually see them with your naked eye, and that's what we're looking at here. So in nature, when a mushroom sporulates, the spores can do a couple things. The spores can find each other and mate. Even though there's no male or female, they do mate, and then they begin to grow that mycelial mat, the root structure kind of thing, because mushrooms don't have roots, but they have the structure that grows underground. That's called mycelium. So the spores will mate, or they'll just germinate. It depends on the kind of mushroom and the weather and all those kinds of things. But then on number 5 there, you can see that they begin to fuse together and to make the mycelial mat underground. And what is so interesting to me is if you walk into the forest and there's fungi that's in the forest that's connecting the roots of all the trees and so forth, in a shoe, in an adult size shoe, there's about 300 miles of mycelium under one shoe.
Incredible.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I saw that you had like a spore positive and a negative spore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not female or male.
No.
But they need to be positive and negative. And what is that? Do you know?
The positive and negative is not even a charge like in an atom.
Okay.
All it depicts for this purpose is that they want to mate. They want to get together. That's all. But what's interesting is some of them don't need a mate. They just germinate.
And it depends on the kind of mushroom or just the environment.
Both. Some mushrooms, they only need a mate. Some mushrooms, they only germinate. But what's interesting is that there are some mushrooms that really pay attention to the amount of rainfall and the temperature and how much shade that they get from the sun with the trees and the canopy overhead and so forth. So because there are so many mushrooms, it's difficult to tell which ones are going to do that. So I'm real blessed when we know what we're doing in a farm with specific mushrooms, because we know what we need to help them do when we get into a petri dish, or whether we put them directly into maybe oak sawdust or something. So it's science has narrowed it down for us. For those of us that farm mushrooms, they've narrowed it down so that we know how to help. It's too fun. So this slide, I wanted to just show you very quickly this particular mushroom and how it sporulates. So the cap of the mushroom has grown up and the stem has come up out of the soil and the cap has opened up, and now it wants to make the next generation, to spread the spores. So what you're looking for in this is a wisp of what looks like smoke coming out of this mushroom. Can you see in the image this smoke?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So those are billions and billions and billions of spores that are being out into the wind.
Released.
Yes, they're just being released. And what's interesting is that they are being released at about 200 miles an hour. They don't just drop out. They go.
And you think mushrooms are, just very stable? It's incredible strength for doing this.
They are so powerful. And what's interesting is I have watched a video of a mushroom coming up, breaking asphalt. It came up through an asphalt road.
That's funny. That's funny you say that, because I'm from Paris, and I always noticed bumps in the asphalt.
Yes.
And it was years later that I heard, it's mushrooms that do that.
It's you wonder how, right? It's like there's such delicate little things, but yet they can force through. And it is because of the water that's in them. They have power. And one of the ways they have that power I find so interesting. Do you know how when something grows, there's a cell division? So you start off with one cell, and then there's 2, and then they divide, and there's 4, and so forth. That's what happens with that entire cycle, clear up until we start to see a baby mushroom with that little pinhead that's coming up. So what's interesting to me is that is all the growing that's going to do. The only way that it continues to get bigger and so forth is just to absorb water in each cell. So there's no more cell division. They just blow up full of water. And it's during that time that they have such power to break through asphalt. Isn't that interesting?
It's more than interesting. It's
yes.
It's the first time, I hear something like this. So
yes. And then
mind-blowing.
When you see a mushroom sporulate, it looks like it's just wisping out. It's 200 miles an hour. It just goes. You know, one day I was harvesting mushrooms in my grow, and I put a big bunch, just maybe 5 or 6 pounds. It was a lot, on the kitchen counter, and then I needed to answer the phone. And when I got back, the spores, the whole group had sporulated in my kitchen there. And it was, my counter was about 10 feet long. And the spores just made a mark that looked like baby powder from one end clear down to the 10-foot mark. I was still wiping up spores. That's how powerful they came out. They didn't just drop 10 feet in my kitchen, clear across. Amazing.
In such a short time also. It's absolutely amazing.
Okay. They're only one, as we touched on a moment ago, of the kingdoms of life on Earth. So there's the plant kingdom, there's the fungi kingdom, there's the animal kingdom, which represented by the fish here that we're part of, right? And then the other kingdoms, look at that. Bacteria, 78%. Okay? They're in, and the protists, they're in the air, they're in our bodies, they're in the soil, they're in and on everything, absolutely everything. This is why then, when we go to cultivate mushrooms in the laboratory, it needs to be a laboratory with a very powerful flow hood that has positive pressure and a HEPA filter. And then we show a UV light when we're not in there. There's a big light bulb. There's a UV light that can kill all the germs and the contaminants to our mushroom farm in that area before we ever start. Because when we want to grow something to begin with in our petri dish, for example, we don't want penicillium in there, right? And part of the reason why is because some bacteria, for example, or other kinds of molds, they go from their spore, their whole life cycle, and back around where the adult mature can sporulate again are in 20 minutes.
Oh my.
So they can take over our lab. They can take over our petri dish. So we have to make sure that things are sterilized in there. So we shower, fresh clothes, cover ourselves from head to toe. We look like surgeons when we go in there. And then that way, those of us that are cultivating mushrooms on a farm know that we just have that particular mushroom growing in there. And then we have several different ways to make sure that it's pure before we ever begin to grow that mushroom out. So it's quite a process. So I wanted to mention here too, that every kingdom has what you and I would call a positive or a negative. For example, if we were talking about the plants, poison ivy is not my favorite, right? So I would say that would be a negative, right? But on the other hand, you eat a plant-based diet solely, and it keeps you alive and it keeps you healthy. Your skin is gorgeous. It's perfection, correct? It's just perfection. So, and then with the animals, let's just touch with fungi. There are negatives there as well. For those people, last summer, unfortunately, in the United States, more than 45 people died eating the wrong mushroom when they were foraging. But here's the kicker, and here's my warning to your audience. Please do not use an AI-generated mushroom identification app on your phone when you're
That's what killed them.
That's what killed them.
Oh,
there are too many lookalikes that if you don't have the old time book in front of you, where you're able to see what they should smell like, because sometimes it's just the scent that will tell you. This one smells acidic. This one smells like lavender, for example. They look exactly the same. But if you intake the wrong one, it could be costing you your life. Yes. So you need to be very careful with that. Okay.
Thank you for the warning, because
you bet. And then let's talk about bacteria. The bacteria in the gut, if we're talking about positives and negatives, what could that be? That could be a benefit. What am I trying to think of? It could be probiotic. My goodness, I'm so busy in my own world trying to keep bacteria out of my lab. I couldn't even remember the word probiotic. But in the gut, then the probiotics are beautiful, right? But
Yes.
if the bacteria in the gut is a foodborne illness, not good. So there's an up and a down with every one of them, right? I want to just make that clear.
And actually, it's a question of balance.
The microbiome in the gut, yes. Yes. So what you're saying then is that there's bad bacteria in there, but as long as there's the balance with the good, a person can be healthy.
Yes, basically.
That's beautiful. Here we go. Let's talk about mushrooms and nutrition. They're calorie poor. Now, what else would you love to say is something is poor? That's usually not a very good word. They don't have very many calories and zero fat, by the way, until we prepare them. But we're going to talk about how to prepare them so that you don't have as much, or you have the good with it only. So they're very nutrient rich. They're high in protein, which is an interesting thing. Their protein in a mushroom is actually more digestible in the body than the protein in chicken, which is more easily digested than beef, right? Or pork.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes. And I love that about that. Now, B vitamins, we've mentioned that. There's B5, there's B12, there's lots of Bs in there. And the B vitamins actually help convert food into energy. So if you don't have that, you're going to be lethargic, right? You don't have the energies that you need. They have minerals in them that few other foods have. So we need to be having a mineral-rich diet in order to keep our immune system as healthy as it can be, so that we are stronger against any sort of illnesses or sicknesses and so forth, okay? They have a unique compound in them called beta-glucans, which is a weird kind of fungal fiber, but it straightens up the immune system. I mean, if you can picture immune system being a sunflower that's a little wilty, those beta-glucans will just help make that immune system just straight up and strong again. And they have complete amino acid profiles, which
it's so interesting for vegetarians and mostly vegan people too.
Yes, it gives you another alternative other than beans, for example, for the protein. And yes.
And it's much more digestible also than the beans, for example, unless it's made properly, it's cooked properly and prepared properly, but mushrooms are just directly super digestible. So,
and that is so important. The number of people that have gut issues are a lot more than what you may think. Hundreds of thousands of people in this country have gut issues. And I know that you would love to just sit down with them and hold their hand and tell them a few things. I know you well enough to know that that's true.
I'm like holding, but you're preaching the choir, Kathryn.
So for oyster mushrooms, let's just take a look at those. This nutrition facts thing that is on every label, it's a wonderful thing, and it really doesn't tell you everything. Right? There's so much behind the scenes, but obviously you can't have a label that's 6 feet long on everything. And I've taken a look at the 6 feet long mushroom nutrients for oyster, and it's pretty doggone amazing. So the pictures, let's talk about those. Each one of these are an oyster mushroom. And oyster refers to the shape and not the flavor. A lot of people are concerned about eating an oyster mushroom because maybe they don't like seafood, and one has absolutely nothing to do with the other. So from a mushroom farming standpoint, here's what I could say to a chef. In the summertime, let's go with the pink ones. And in the winter time, let's go with the blue ones. Okay. So I know that I can create a deeper color if I do that, because at the farm, I'm controlling the the environment within the grow room, because we're trying our best to mimic nature, right? Because not all of these mushrooms would come out at the same time of year. One would want the temperature cooler, and one, like the ones that are standing straight up there, the king oyster mushrooms, they don't grow at all in nature unless, of course, they are hidden inside of leaves and branches and so forth. And the reason for that is because when they breathe in oxygen like people, and they breathe out CO2 like people, they need to have that CO2 close to them. So they actually want to breathe back in a little bit of their own exhale. And that's what creates the shape and the size and so forth. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So at the farm, we have to keep all of these things in mind to be able to grow them. So let's get back to nutrition. 0 calories, my friends. And obviously no cholesterol. And the sodium is only 1%. I mean, it's just tiny, tiny, tiny. What is so cool to me is the vitamin D. Now, mushrooms don't use photosynthesis like a plant does to be able to create energy, to create their food. Okay. Their food is what they're decomposing. So it's the strawberry they're decomposing. It's the wood out in the nature, the downed tree that they're decomposing. In the farm, they're decomposing sterile oak sawdust or sterile straw. Okay, so those are the kinds of foods that we give them to grow, but they're doing what they do in nature, which is to decompose. But what's interesting is plants can produce, the sun produces the vitamin D, and a mushroom doesn't have to have sun. In other words, you'll kill them with full sun. They like the shade, right? They like it moist, they like it shady, but yet they have vitamin D in them. They're the only thing in the produce aisle at the grocery store that actually has vitamin D in it. And I just find it so fascinating.
And so do we know how they produce that vitamin D?
Science hasn't figured it out yet, but I have a theory.
Of course you do, Kathryn.
When there are plants and fungi, so the plant is in the soil, the fungi is in the soil. As you know, the plant root that comes in contact with the fungi, there's an exchange that's happening there, right? So the mushroom will bring in water and nutrient from the plant way beyond the root ball, could be hundreds of miles beyond the root ball sometimes. But it'll bring in what it needs. But what does the fungi get in return? Well, it gets the sugar, it gets the glucose from the plant. So there's a symbiotic relationship that is an exchange there. That's where I think they're also getting the vitamin D, because it's the plant that is full face in the sun. I haven't found a research report to substantiate that claim, but we're going to call that good for right now, because because where would it come from, right? It's not.
I'm pretty sure you're right, because it makes totally sense that it would come from the sun, through the plant, down to the mushroom. Somehow the mushroom know how to use some molecules from the chlorophyll and the photosynthesis from the plant. To transform it into vitamin D. It's just absolutely amazing.
It is amazing. And
so I think your theory, your hypothesis is really standing well.
Thank you. I appreciate you loving my hypothesis. That's awesome. One of the things that we do with mushrooms on the farm as well, we have some customers that are in Seattle, Washington. And so we dry their mushrooms and then we send them to them, but we dry them in the sun. And I don't know how this works, but when we take a look at the nutrient analysis of a mushroom that is dried on a dehydrator, for example, that has vitamin D in it, but those that are dried in the sun, they're almost quadrupled the amount of vitamin D that's in them. And then obviously in Seattle, people most generally take a large amount of vitamin D every day because of not having full sun there a lot of times. So that we can actually assist as well, and nutritionally and for their body, is to increase the amount of vitamin D that's in them.
Wow, that's even more blowing.
Right.
Yeah.
So this bottom of this nutrition fact, let's look at what that actually breaks down to. And we could spend all day right here, because very few foods have as more than 25% of a nutrient, of a micro or a macronutrient in it. And here are 4 that are 24 to 28% in a typical old mushroom. Okay. Now, copper, riboflavin, niacin, and pantothenic acid are those. But let's just look at the check marks, for example. Copper will make new red blood cells. How important is that? Keeps nerve cells healthy. And we spoke already about neuropathy and Alzheimer's. They form collagen. Right? So I mean, women across the world are taking collagen supplements, and here the copper actually helps the body form its own collagen. It helps iron be absorbed into the body, and it turns sugar into energy. If I go straight down, it helps food turn into energy again under niacin, keeps the nervous system healthy, keeps skin healthy. Up to riboflavin, fights free radicals. And get this, it changes vitamin B6 and folate into usable forms. There are people, and my daughter is one of them, whose body cannot take in folate or vitamin B6. She has to have it in other forms. And so riboflavin actually helps her body do that. Pantothenic acid is vitamin B5. And again, it turns food into energy. And it also helps tear down fats. So if we just look at 6 small oyster mushrooms, we're only talking about 3 ounces, a little tiny bit here. And the systems within the body that it can help. And I'm not going to name the systems, but we're talking about blood cells, and we're talking about nerve cells and the immune system and the skin, and to help the skin stay healthy and to turn food into energy. Just this simple little mushroom that, by the way, is sauteed properly with some thyme on it will make your socks roll up and down all by themselves, thinking nothing about the nutrients that are in them in general. Okay, selenium is important.
It's crucial too.
It's crucial. Now, selenium, this only shows up at 3 to 7%, right? But I looked at other foods and it's 0.
It's 0, yeah.
It's 0.
Very poor.
Yes. So it's antioxidant production, immune support, thyroid health, cognitive function. So we're looking at brain function, heart function, cancer prevention, right? And it helps repair DNA. Hello.
No.
I get excited about this. And I also get excited about this for people that are on restricted diets, because I took a look at other foods that were high in selenium. Brazil nuts. Highest thing on the planet that we know of in selenium. Okay. Now, if you've ever tried to crack a Brazil nut open, you may not be healthy by the time you're finished with it, because it takes forever. So seafood and shrimp, organ meats, right? Dairy and eggs. Now, let's talk for a moment about someone who's on a vegetarian diet. Okay. So can they eat Brazil nuts?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm vegetarian.
Right.
And the problem is I'm not crazy about the taste of it.
Well, there you go. That is a good point. Good point. Okay. So selenium, you're not getting it from Brazil nuts. What about seafood?
Well, as a vegetarian, I don't eat seafood.
Okay. Do you eat organ meats?
No.
What about dairy?
You know.
What about dairy?
dairy, very, very little, and it's only from goat or sheep, not cow.
Okay. Okay. And I happen to know, well, no, you have chickens, correct?
Oh yeah, I love my
Okay.
chickens, and
Okay.
I have their eggs, like fresh eggs of the day. So yeah.
Okay. So with a person that is on your diet, what do you have available to you for selenium? There's other things other than what we see on the slide here, but in general,
it's going to be Brazil nuts and eggs.
Mm-hmm. And the Brazil nuts you don't care for. And so mushrooms at the 3 to 7%,
Exactly.
It's critical, and it's a pretty good number, correct?
Totally. And I love the taste of it, of the mushrooms. Mostly the way you taught me how to cook them, and we're going to see that later.
Yes, makes a big difference, doesn't it? Okay, so here we talk about cooking, and I have a picture here of those on my cast iron skillet, and we're not even there yet, so we're going to have to ignore the picture for a quick minute. I want to talk about the beta glucans, which is the weirdo dietary fiber that is in a mushroom. And I love the word weirdo, because if you're a weirdo and you love mushrooms, then you're on the right track. Let me just say that out loud. So the beta glucans, they stimulate the immune cells. Okay, do we need them? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And for the killer cells, okay, we're talking about killer cells. They fight cancer. They seek out cancer cells and kill them, and don't even kill a healthy cell that's around it. Okay, so those killer cells are amazing, and they are within those beta glucans. For those people that are going through chemotherapy, it actually helps reduce the side effects of chemotherapy, and it helps to keep the LDL, the bad cholesterol, intact. And blood sugar regulation, it actually slows the absorption of the glucose, and it has a prebiotic effect. So there's no downside there, right? And beta glucans are mushrooms are a primary source of them. They're amazing. Okay, we are going to talk about cooking.
Here we are.
All right, here we are. And from rubbery to remarkable is what I've put down here. So here's the method that we talked about, that you said to me while we were having coffee about a month ago. You said I don't cook them any other way now.
No way. No way. I don't. Since I did this, and I even cooked for guests, and they were like, how did you do for making those mushrooms so delicious, and even not crunchy, but crunchier or something, and not soft and a little gooey. And I said, well, I have a friend, and her name is Kathryn, and she made it remarkable indeed.
Thank you. Let's talk about that. Okay, folks. Even if you're making a soup and you're going to add mushrooms, please do this first. This is going to seem counterintuitive, but trust me, darlings, this is wonderful. Dry saute your mushrooms in a skillet over medium-high heat. No water, no fat, no seasonings. What you're doing is that you're allowing the water that is in the mushroom to evaporate. Now, you're not trying to make them crisp. You don't want all of the water gone, but you want to saute them to release the water, okay? At that point, over medium-high heat, they will begin to brown a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's what your guests were saying about being a little bit crisp and not a mushy thing, but they brown just a little bit, and then you turn them. And if you do it properly, you only turn them once. Okay, so you wait. You can actually see sometimes the moisture coming off of them, and you wait and you just turn them one time. Okay. Now, if you're making a soup, I would not recommend adding fat to the saute pan, but I would take them out and then I would drop them directly into the soup. Okay. Now, sometimes on the farm, we grow mushrooms that their caps are tiny. The caps are 1/4 of an inch across, and we'll drop those right into the soup. And because when you take a spoonful of soup and you see a whole mushroom in there, just a tiny whole mushroom, it's wonderful. But otherwise, I would recommend doing 2 different kinds of mushrooms, one dry in your soup, one dry sauteed, and then one fresh in there together, because the umami-ness, that flavor that's difficult to describe, comes out better. So back to the sauteing. Once they're sauteed, and they're a little bit brown, feel free to add some fat to that. May it be olive oil or coconut oil, or butter, if that is the flavor that you want there, and then add your seasonings. I will tell you that if you add salt before the water is evaporated, you're going to get a gummy, chewy mushroom. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? We're trying to avoid that texture problem that some people have with mushrooms. So you wait to add the fat and the seasonings till afterwards. Garlic is popular with them. Thyme is very popular with mushrooms. And if you've never had mushroom toast made in this fashion, where, you know, a lot of people love avocado toast, so it's kind of on the same vein there, you would be happy. Let me just tell you that. The flavors. Now, not all mushrooms taste the same. And culinary mushrooms, specialty mushrooms, have a lot of flavor to them. Button mushrooms are flavorless by comparison. Okay. When they're raw, right? When they're raw, they're flavorless. And that's just my opinion. I'm hoping not to offend anyone. But what I'm trying to say is the ones that we cultivate, there's a range of how bold those flavors can be. So sometimes they're mild. For example, a golden oyster mushroom, when they're sauteed in this manner, you can smell what smells like nuts. There's a light nutty flavor and scent to them. And other mushrooms are more like the lion's mane. They're more like a shrimp flavor. They're not fishy, but there's just that little bit of delicateness of a seafood in them. So you get the different flavors, but cooking them this way improves the texture, and it gets rid of the mushiness, and it improves the texture with a little bit of a crisp, and the flavor, and get this, the nutrition also goes up. In a specialty mushroom, the nutrition is enhanced when they're heated through.
That was my next question, because I am the ambassador of the raw food, let's say, and I know it's not easy for most of the people to have raw vegetables, but there are ways, to get accustomed to it if you're inflamed in your guts.
Yes.
But which is true is that you have the full micronutrients and micronutrition and macro if it's still raw. But so how does it work for the mushroom that actually you're saying that it releases even more nutrition as it's being cooked?
I don't have an answer for you. I believe in the research that I've done, what I believe is happening is when you prepare the mushroom for cooking, for example, if this is the cap, you can strip the cap like right down to the gills, right? You can just tear it, but you're tearing open the cell with that. You're actually splitting a cell wall. And again, it's my hypothesis, but I believe that this is what's happening is that cell wall is split, and when it's heated, it releases more.
I see.
I'm going to call it magic. I'm just going to call it magic.
I think you're right. I think mushrooms are magical anyway.
Thank you. Okay, so one of the other things I recommend when you cook is if you combine different kinds together, you use them both cooked and raw together, especially in a soup where they will be cooked. A chef will tell you when they have an award-winning tomato soup, it's because they use different kinds of tomatoes. And one of them they roasted. and the other they dehydrated and then rehydrated. They're prepared differently. So they're different kinds of mushrooms in different stages of preparation that all came together to make the soup that you don't have words for. That's an award-winning tomato soup. The same is happening with the mushroom if you combine them. So one of the other things I like to tell people is they get a little confused when you look at a recipe and it says wild mushroom soup or wild mushroom and rice. It's like, what's a wild mushroom? Do you go forage them? No. Do you just pick anything out of the grocery store? You can. You can even make a wild soup, if you want to call it wild, with button mushrooms, right? And the way that I get away with thinking like that is that, to me, any mushroom that's just wild about being in that recipe makes it a wild mushroom soup.
Oh, I see.
Because you don't see very often a mushroom soup recipe that is only at its best and most flavorful with a one particular kind of mushroom. There are those, but otherwise you can exchange the mushrooms that you have, or the ones that happen to be at the store, or the ones that you pick up from the farmer's market with, and they may not match the one that's listed in the recipe, but I'm giving you permission. This is a permission slip for your audience. Any mushroom that is wild about being in that recipe, you go for it. You go for it. Mushroom toast. There's probably more than 100 recipes that I've seen for mushroom toast. In general, I want your audience to notice that it has chopped thyme, garlic, salt, and pepper. Now this one has a splash of Marsala wine on it, and that is a little bit much. But to me, this is dinner. So at that point, that's not too much. If it's breakfast, I would say to saute it exactly the way that we talked about. Oftentimes, I will make mushroom toast for breakfast, but I'll also put arugula on the bread, and then I put those warm sauteed mushrooms on the top of it. This is a delicious, delicious way to have mushrooms and all the nutrition to go with it that we've talked about. These are the king oyster mushrooms that we looked at, where you cut them one direction and they're like a scallop, and the other direction, that's actually a mushroom steak. Same mushroom that a chef can use many, many different ways. There are recipes for pulled mushroom sandwiches, like a pulled pork sandwich with barbecue sauce and all of that. There are vegan restaurants that are making a pulled mushroom sandwich that people can't tell that it's not pork.
Oh my.
They love it. They love it. Here is a wild mushroom soup recipe. Now this calls for creminis. Okay. Now this one does call for a chicken stock or a veggie stock in it. But notice that it's not a cream of. Okay. In this recipe, let me take that back. I did pick one that did have some whole milk and some sour cream in it, but a recipe for Hungarian mushroom soup. Oh my goodness. It uses Hungarian paprika. And if you want to add a little cream, you can, but it's not in the general recipe. It is as rich as a dairy-based, cream-based mushroom soup. It is absolutely delicious. I'm going to switch gears and talk about medicine for a little bit, if we can. The historical uses started with psilocybin mushrooms. When I researched mushrooms and food back into history, I didn't find them as food first. I found them as the traditional religious activities that were taking back in Mesoamerica and back further beyond. This happens to be a painting that Yavapai College is a regional college here in Prescott, if someone wants this painting. I had him paint this so that we can see the cave paintings from 9,000 years ago in the background, and then one of the religious mushrooms he painted there in the foreground. This is actually right off of a Siberian cave, and you'll see the people that they have mushroom heads, and that is indicative of the hallucinogenic experience that happened during the religious ceremonies. When I did the research, mushrooms encompass so many things. It's obvious with the things that we're talking about today, and then soil health, and then all these other things. But when I went back and I looked into that, I was actually stuck there for about a week in my research, because just to kind of watch how the transition happened from, we ate this particular mushroom and there was no religious experience, but that tumor on so-and-so's leg is going away. Every single time we have the religious experience with this mushroom that doesn't work for religion, the tumor's going away. What's happening here? So they began to figure out the medicine before they actually began to say, and they also taste good, right? And it was just happened through time. I want to touch for a moment, if we can, on breast cancer. Cancers in general are a very tough and oftentimes deadly diagnoses. Mushrooms are helping to lead the way in medicines that either help reduce chemotherapy effects, or they're being used in labs now to watch the mycelium cell growing in a petri dish next to breast cancer tumor, or a portion of it that still has healthy cells around it, and watch what happens in the petri dish. In this mushroom, for example, it is not available yet. The testing is still happening, but this is a honey mushroom. It is a parasite. So a parasite will actually kill something and then eat it. Whereas the mushroom typically that we eats what's already passed and then degrades it and back down into the nutrient. But there are several mushrooms that are being tested for many, 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 many diseases and medical conditions, whereby the mycelial mushroom the mycelial mat, the fungi, will consume. It will break apart and consume a cancer cell, and then leave the healthy cell alone if there are healthy cells there in the petri dish. I would like to compare this to what happens when mushrooms, for example, will decompose a big oak tree in the forest. Okay. So what happens is that there's several different kinds of fungi that'll work together. But what they'll do, if they take a tree, there's a certain kind of fungi that will eat the hardest part. It'll eat the lignin. And then another kind comes in and eats the other parts of the tree. So eventually it all breaks down into topsoil, correct?
Yes.
I liken that to what happens in a petri dish, because this mycelial mat that's growing on agar, that would normally be under the ground, would go towards the cell, and then it deconstructs it. It literally takes it apart and only eats what it wants. But once the toxin, the cancer cell, is broken apart, it's no longer able to reproduce.
Exactly.
Right? So this is also what happens with mushrooms. If we just skip for a moment and we talk about what happens in soil that has been just soaked in diesel fuel, for example. Okay? You can't grow food in that. Nothing grows in that. And in general, it's scraped away and then taken someplace and burned. But in Paul Stamets, the mycologist that we're so proud of here within the United States, does testing, he will inoculate that pile of just diesel fuel and hydrocarbons, and the mycelial mat will run through it. It'll just keep growing, but what it's consuming, instead of the tree, it's consuming the hydrocarbons. It's taking it apart. So what was toxic and causes cancer, it's a carcinogenic. Mushrooms are actually cleaning up carcinogenic soil, and it's fruiting.
It's incredible.
And the soil can be used for the crop again.
Yes, it's like there's everything in nature. There's all the antidotes. It's just we need to have this knowledge.
Yes. Yes. So that's what's happening. That's what's happening in a petri dish as well. It takes the cancer cell apart. Okay. So those killer cells, it's not just going in and eating everything. It's penetrating it. It disrupts it. It literally gets it to the molecule level and then just picks it apart.
That's funny because apparently it does it directly on the petri dish, but like you said earlier about enhancing those natural killers, that kills only the cancer cells in the body.
Yes,
it's like a synergy or something. I mean, there's something very parallel in a body or in nature, or it's amazing.
Yes. And I don't know how exactly the correlation happens, but in my mind, if I know that whatever it is that takes on a mushroom, may it be the soil or human body or the mushroom that's in a horse medicine, for example, there are nutritional supplements for horses that are mushrooms. And specific ones. So if you're a horse owner, don't let them just eat anything. But my point here is that the breaking apart of the cells and then the other action of boosting up the immune system. So it seems to me like they're doing the two things at the same time. That's amazing to me. I'm so grateful.
Oh, and just before, I saw that, so 1 out of 8 women in the US would have breast cancer, but I saw that there was also another percentage that was interesting for you to comment.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. My mama had breast cancer, and when I would go to the oncologist with her, you would see a man with a woman, and they were a couple, and you would assume that they're there for her, right? Women get breast cancer, right? And then there were a few times where I just saw a man. And so I asked the doctor, I see men in here by themselves. And he said, yes. And I said, men get breast cancer. And he said, they do, for exactly the same reason that women get breast cancer. He said, it's an estrogen overload in the body. And we're seeing, so he says that your human body makes estrogen and progesterone, right? Both men and women. But our bodies are accepting into our estrogen receptor cells chemicals that look like estrogen. I'm very familiar with the problem on farms with this makes me sad. I'm so sorry. With pesticides, the molecule is so close to an estrogen molecule that your body will take it. So what happens then is you've got the estrogen in the body that's made in the body, and then you've got what it's been taking in from a pesticide or carpeting or from touching tires, some makeup. Right. So there's a lot of ways that estrogen mimics can actually get on your skin, or you breathe them in. So you get estrogen dominant. But what's one of the things that estrogen is known for? And that is to make breasts. And how do you make a breast but to duplicate cells? So even in a man's body, when he's estrogen dominant, because there's too much estrogen in there, then it begins to duplicate cells. And it usually duplicates cells in a reproductive organ. So in men, it also happens with testicular cancer, for example, with women, ovarian cancer. And I've just used breast cancer here as an example, because what that doctor said to me just shocked me, because I wasn't there in my mind yet, right? And then he actually said to me, don't assume if a man is here with his wife that they're there for her. He said, because there are times that wives come in with their husbands who have breast cancer. And this is how it happens.
That is very sad.
It's very sad. Very, very sad. And science is making great headways. And I'm so grateful that they're using items in nature. Mushrooms are very popular in science to be able to make things happen, because there's a history there with making the pharmaceutical medications that combat a situation, that combat a problem, that kill a cancer cell, that rebuilds a nerve cell, which they used to think couldn't happen, right? So polysaccharides and being antimicrobial is so important when it comes to the mushrooms that are used to make medicine, or what happens in the body when you eat them. Polysaccharides are usually a chain of 3 sugars, but the ones that come from mushrooms that make them immune system straightening, because that's just the terminology and what I see in my mind, that it just helps bring it back to okay. It's actually 4 molecules that are bonded together, which is unusual. It's interesting that fungi can also be antimicrobial, which we see with penicillium making penicillin, right? So this is an entire 2-hour explanation right here. But what I can tell you is that polysaccharides from mushrooms are a carbohydrate that your body goes more, please. Thank you, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And science is using to make medications to kill infections. Thank you for allowing me to share with you today. That is all that I have for you today.
Kathryn, that's me. I thank you so much for such the richness of all your knowledge. Is just mind-blowing. It's just amazing. I just love it. I love to learn more and more. And also I found it so beautiful that your work with mushrooms, and we see that later, and the soil mirrors, what happens in my own kitchen with my gluten-free sourdough bread. And not only gluten-free, but mine it's gluten-free, but basically sourdough. And how it's working behind the scenes, all those microorganisms, and transform and nourish everything. And I think it's just absolutely amazing. And thank you so much again, Kathryn. And the story is not over. We're gonna meet again and talk about your incredible microbial soil blend. Which is also another mind-blowing episode we're gonna have, and I'm so happy that I can share that with the public. So
thank you.